there is sort of a spirit of free speech, right, that is, in my opinion, violated when a company that controls a website that the vast majority of people are using, that they're going to sort of control the content and say, oh, this content gets promoted, this doesn't, and it's something that like everybody is using. I feel like there's sort of like a spirit of the First Amendment that kind of, my hope would that would sort of guide those companies in the way that they approach their business. But that's more just something that I would hope that they would do, as opposed to something that we could make them do, or that we should be able to make them do. And on the other side of that coin, I would hope that consumers and internet users, that if they discover that you know, different websites and so on, and particularly like Facebook and Twitter and things like that are, you know, that there's like slowing down speech that they disagree with, like political opinions that they disagree with, my hope would be that people would then go use different forums, or maybe communicate in different ways that are not on Facebook, right? So I deactivated my account. It's good for my mental health. So, so yeah.
One thing that I was concerned about, I have a friend of mine that the Portland Police Intelligence Unit looked on his Facebook and found criminal action and filed against him in federal court. What kind of protections are there that we should be looking at on something like that?
So I think, you know, I mean, that raises to me the issue of like social media surveillance. And social media surveillance is something that we are really concerned about. You know, often when we're talking about internet privacy, we're talking about privacy in spaces that we've taken some action to be private. So my email to another person, or again, like my private pictures, things that I've only shared with certain people. But I think that we should be concerned with the government looking at information that we put out there publicly when they're trying to target folks, in particular for their political activity, for their religious affiliations, for their social views, things like that. And social media monitoring software is really sophisticated at this point. It can be used to do such a wide variety of things, right? So there's the basic like keyword searches, right? Like we decide that this particular thing is something we're interested in. We want to figure out who's talking about it and just do basic keyword searches. But there's much more complicated searches, and then algorithms that they can use to, say, for example, figure out who is really influential on the internet. Who is it that influences the people in their networks? Who's connected with people? Who, when they say, hey guys, this is a really important political issue, it like spreads. They can also analyze the way that certain types of messages spread and are communicated. They can also figure out how to sort of like seed certain types of opinions and ideas, right? They also claim that they can do what they call like threat assessments. We're gonna figure out who's dangerous on the internet. And that is fraught with all sorts of problems, because whoever it is that's deciding the criteria for what makes you dangerous has their own biases, right? And then you can never really write an algorithm to figure that out right. Because it could just be somebody saying, oh, I'm gonna go out and do this dangerous thing. It could be somebody writing an article about how people go out and do this dangerous thing, right? And algorithms aren't gonna be able to distinguish between those things. So we have a lot of concerns about social media monitoring software. And here in Oregon, I don't know how many of you heard about a couple of years ago, I feel like it was a couple of years ago, maybe it was a year and a half ago, our own State Department of Justice, their criminal division, was trying out some new software. They were like, oh, we've got this new, we want to try out this new toy, this new, I think it was called Data Miner, new social media monitoring software, and it just happened that I think it was the FBI had put out an APB around the country saying Black Lives Matter is super dangerous, they're gonna harm your communities, you better watch out, they're a basically domestic terrorist organization. And so somebody in the criminal division of the Oregon Department of Justice decided, I'm going to test out the software by searching Black Lives Matter. And they searched it within a certain geographic area that was really small around the Capitol, and the person that ended up coming up in their search was Arias Johnson, who was the head of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. He had posted several different things that referenced Black Lives Matter, but he had also posted a photograph from an old Public Enemy album cover. And if you recall the album cover, what it is it's the target of a gun, right? It's like what you're looking at through a sight, and it has the outline of a person. And the outline of the person was actually intended to be the outline of a black man, right? But for whatever reason, this agent, when they looked at it, they thought it was the outline of a police officer. And that somehow Arias Johnson was promoting killing the police, when actually this Public Enemy artwork was supposed to be bringing attention to the killing of black men by police officers. So they then got really concerned that the head of the Civil Rights Division must be super dangerous, and we better do an investigation. And this investigation into his social media activity went all the ways up to the Attorney General. And when she saw it, she said, "What in the world have you guys been doing? This is not only wrong, and you're profiling him, but it actually violates Oregon law." Because in Oregon, we have a very unique law that prohibits the government from collecting information on us based on our political, religious, and social views. And that law was passed shortly after 9/11, when the government was doing a lot of targeting of people based on their religious views. And also when we found out that the Portland Police Bureau was doing things like going to protests and collecting all sorts of photographs of people who were protesting and things like that and documenting them, right? And so we got that state law passed. Anyway, so that's a very long way of answering your question of social media monitoring software and surveillance. I think
Yeah,
is
all the
super
police have to
important.
do is make up some
Okay.
suspect
Yeah.
crime.
I have a question in the front row.
I'm
Somebody over here
curious,
from.
how legally could you approach the idea of social media monitoring not being allowable if you also could say, well, like, I am a person who is not on Facebook, and so it's perfectly possible to live your life without actually posting to a third-party social media. So I'm just curious, like, how do those nuances get addressed?
Right. So, I mean, we could always say, yes, people have the choice of not speaking, right? If they don't want the government to see what they're saying, they could not speak. But that is, in essence, the chilling effect, right? Like, that's the chilling effect that we talk about with the First Amendment all the time, is that people should have the right to choose to speak. I choose not to have Facebook, not because I don't want to share my political opinions, because I do it all the time, but I want to use other methods, because Facebook I just find to be really problematic for a lot of reasons. But I have a lot of concern about the fact that people, if they know they're being watched, are less likely to share their opinions. And really interesting thing on that point is that there's been some research done where folks were interviewed about their opinions about free speech and their opinions about government surveillance, and the very people who said, I don't care about government surveillance because I have nothing to hide, those people were the most likely to chill their own speech when they knew they were being watched by government. So, fascinating thing. People who are like really ticked off about the government surveilling them are often the people who are like, well, even if they're surveilling me, I'm gonna say it anyway. It's a very interesting sort of weird situation there. Yeah.
So actually the person that Bob here, Robert West, was referencing is Chris Ponte, who runs Oregon Cop Watcher, and formerly Oregon Cop Block, but he's one of the premier cop watchers that's on the front line here. And this whole investigation was actually started by a stalking charge that was lodged against him by Mark Kruger, who's the Nazi cop of Portland, who runs the Vice Division. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Mark Kruger, he's the guy who erected a shrine at Rocky Butte Park over 5 fallen SS soldiers. And he's actually the guy who clears every informant within the Portland Police Bureau. And that's right directly in their own directives. So Mark Kruger, a Nazi cop, runs the Vice Division, and which, you know, is kind of like a Nazi eugenicist's wet dream job. And he not only has control over informants in his own department, but every department in Portland. And that's right in their directives. And I was charged with stalking too of a city employee, and that was to get me out of City Hall from speaking about police brutality stuff and other stuffs like politicians' links to Terry Bean and other people that have been accused of child rape and all kinds of stuff like that. And also Robert West here, he's got a stalking order on him, and that was by Mark Kruger. And the guy Eli Ritchie that was here earlier, he recently got a stalking order put on him by Chief Outlaw, the police chief, for doing 2 street interviews. One was where she was in uniform, and the other was where she was out of uniform at a Safeway. And so now the police are getting stalking orders put on citizen journalists and cop watchers and people on the front lines of actual real activism, not just, you know, keyboard activism and, you know, all the cocktail liberal activism and stuff like that. And I was just wondering, you know, I hit up Matt Dos Santos about my case, and I was later convicted of stalking for attending a Portland City Council meeting. So I was just wondering if you guys are ever gonna jump in on this before, you know, they start coming for you guys next. Because you're the next people that they're gonna come for, every activist, not just the people on the front lines filming the police and stuff like that and really rocking the boat. They're gonna come after everyone.
Yeah, I got
So-
you.
And pretty soon you won't be able to talk to anyone
So,
without getting a stalking
so
order.
if you don't mind my answering that question, so I'm the policy director. And so the work that I work on is really focused on the state legislature, and occasionally on city council in regards to the municipal ordinances that they pass. So I am not the legal director.
Oh, I know.
And I'm not engaged in our litigation or our legal program. And so I really can't answer questions, about what our legal
Well, maybe you
director
could,
will do.
Try and draft up
I'm-
something to
I'm happy
protect
to
us a
pass
little more.
along whatever message you'd like to pass along, and it sounds like you actually have communicated to our legal director, so I think that's the right person to talk to. And I think all the folks here actually came to talk about